Tonight, when the sun goes down, you will probably turn on a light without thinking. A small switch on the wall, a glowing screen in your hand, a streetlight outside your window. Modern nights are bright. But for almost all of human history, night meant something very different. When darkness fell in the past, it did not simply make things harder to see. It changed how people lived, how they slept, how they feared, how they prayed, how they told stories. Without electricity, night was not simply the absence of light. It was a world of shadows, a world of quiet dangers, a world where a single candle flame could decide how the next few hours of your life would unfold. Today we travel back into that forgotten darkness to discover what nights were truly like before electricity. Chapter 1. When the sun ruled human life. For most of history, the sun controlled the rhythm of daily life. Without electric light, people could not simply extend the day whenever they wished. Work, travel, and social life all depended on daylight. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the world changed quickly. Shadows grew longer, colors faded into shades of gray, and eventually, the landscape disappeared entirely into darkness. For farmers and villagers, this meant the working day ended early. Once the sun vanished, there was little practical work that could continue outdoors. Tools were put away, animals were secured, doors were shut, and slowly, the village settled into the quiet rhythm of night. Inside homes, small fires and candles provided faint light, but these sources were weak compared to modern lighting. A single candle could barely illuminate an entire room. Families often gathered close together, sitting near the hearth or candlelight. The night forced people inward, into their homes, into their thoughts, into conversation. But darkness also brought something else. Uncertainty, because outside the walls of their homes, the world had become nearly impossible to see. Chapter 2. How dark the world really was. Modern people rarely experience true darkness. Even in rural areas today, distant cities glow faintly on the horizon. Streetlights scatter artificial light across the landscape. But before electricity, night could be absolutely black. On moonless nights, the darkness was so deep that a person might struggle to see their own hands. Forests became impenetrable. Roads vanished into shadow. Even familiar paths felt strange and disorienting. Travel after sunset was dangerous. Without lanterns or torches, travelers could easily become lost. Many accidents occurred simply because people could not see where they were stepping. Cliffs, rivers, uneven roads, all became hidden threats. Because of this, most journeys ended before nightfall. In fact, many inns and taverns existed specifically for travelers who could not safely continue once darkness arrived. But darkness did not only make travel dangerous. It changed how people thought, how they imagined the unseen world around them. Chapter 3. The night was full of fear. Before modern science explained the natural world, darkness allowed the imagination to grow powerful. For many people, night was a time when dangerous things moved unseen. Wolves and predators hunted under cover of darkness. Bandits used night to hide their movements. And beyond real dangers, people believed supernatural forces walked the night. Stories of spirits, demons, and witches filled medieval folklore. Many believed evil creatures were strongest after sunset. This belief shaped behavior. Villagers avoided walking alone at night. Doors and windows were tightly secured. Candles were sometimes left burning as protection. Some families even said prayers specifically meant to guard against nighttime spirits. The night was not just dark. It was mysterious, and sometimes terrifying. Chapter 4. Life by candlelight. Inside homes, light came from fragile sources. Candles, oil lamps, fireplaces. But each source had limitations. Candles were expensive for poor families. Many households used them sparingly, lighting only 1 or 2 per evening. Oil lamps required fuel that also had to be purchased or prepared. This meant that nighttime activities were limited. Reading was difficult unless someone held a candle close to the page. Sewing required careful attention to the small pool of light. Even eating could be challenging in dim lighting. Because of this, evenings were often quiet and simple. Families talked, shared stories, or simply rested after long days of labor. But one of the most surprising parts of pre-electric life involved something we rarely think about today: sleep itself. Chapter 5. The forgotten pattern of sleep. Modern people usually sleep in one long block during the night. But before electricity, sleep worked differently. Historical records suggest many people followed a pattern known as segmented sleep. Instead of sleeping straight through the night, people often had two separate periods of sleep. The first sleep began shortly after nightfall. After several hours, people would wake naturally. This waking period might last an hour or two. During this quiet time, individuals sometimes prayed, talked quietly, reflected on dreams, or even visited neighbors. Eventually, they returned to bed for a second sleep that lasted until morning. This pattern appears in historical diaries, literature, and medical writings. It suggests that night was not always spent entirely asleep. Instead, people moved slowly through cycles of rest and quiet wakefulness, a rhythm shaped by darkness itself. Chapter 6. Nighttime Work That Never Stopped. Although most people slept during the night, some jobs required constant activity. Night watchmen patrolled city streets, listening for trouble. Their duties included watching for fires, stopping thieves, calling out the time during the night. In some towns, watchmen carried lanterns and long staffs as they walked through dark streets. Other workers also labored after sunset. Bakers often began work during the night, so bread would be ready in the morning. Innkeepers stayed awake to welcome late travelers. And in busy ports, sailors and dock workers sometimes loaded ships under torchlight. Night was quieter, but it was never completely still. Chapter 7. Cities After Dark. In medieval and early modern cities, nighttime had its own atmosphere. Once shops closed and markets emptied, the streets grew quiet. But the darkness created opportunities for crime. Without streetlights, thieves could move through shadows with ease. City governments eventually created curfews to control nighttime activity. Bells rang to signal that it was time for citizens to return home. Anyone found wandering after curfew could be questioned by watchmen. These rules were meant to keep order in a world where darkness made policing difficult. Chapter 8. The Beauty of the Night Sky. While night brought danger and fear, it also revealed something modern people rarely see: the true night sky. Without artificial light, the stars appeared incredibly bright. The Milky Way stretched across the sky like a glowing river. Countless stars filled the darkness. For people in the past, the night sky was not hidden by light pollution. It was one of the most breathtaking sights in the natural world. Astronomers studied it. Sailors navigated by it. And ordinary people gazed upward with wonder. The night sky reminded humanity how vast the universe truly was. Chapter 9. Festivals, Fires, and Night Gatherings. Despite the darkness, night was not always quiet. Certain events brought people together after sunset. Festivals often involved large bonfires that lit entire fields. Music, dancing, and storytelling continued late into the night. Torches flickered. Laughter echoed. For a few hours, the darkness became something joyful rather than frightening. These gatherings were rare moments when night felt alive with celebration. Chapter 10. Traveling Through the Darkness. For most of human history, night travel was something people tried to avoid. Without electricity, there were no glowing highways, no headlights cutting through the darkness, and no illuminated signs guiding travelers safely along the road. Instead, once the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, the world transformed into something far more uncertain. Roads became nearly invisible. A narrow dirt path that felt familiar during daylight could become confusing and dangerous at night. Travelers relied on lanterns, torches, or sometimes nothing at all but the faint light of the moon. But these sources of light were weak. A torch could illuminate only a few steps ahead. A lantern might glow softly in the darkness, but it did little to reveal dangers lurking farther down the road. Because of this, travelers faced constant risk. They could stumble into ditches, lose their way entirely, or encounter far more serious threats. Bandits often preferred to operate under the cover of darkness. The night allowed them to hide their movements and ambush travelers when visibility was low. Wild animals also moved more freely after sunset. Wolves, foxes, and other predators roamed forests and fields once the quiet of night settled across the land. For merchants carrying valuable goods, night travel could be terrifying. Many planned their journeys carefully to reach towns or inns before the sun went down. These inns became safe islands of light along dark roads. Inside their walls, travelers found warm fires, food, and the comforting presence of other human beings. But outside those doors, the darkness remained vast and unpredictable. Chapter 11. The Cost of Light. In a world without electricity, light itself was a valuable resource. Every candle that burned meant something had been spent. In wealthier homes, candles were often made from beeswax. These burned cleaner and brighter, but were expensive to produce. Poorer households relied on tallow candles made from animal fat. These candles smoked more, smelled unpleasant, and burned less evenly. But they were cheaper. Still, even tallow candles could not be wasted. Many families used them sparingly, lighting them only when absolutely necessary. A single candle might be shared by several people sitting close together. Someone reading might lean near the flame. Someone sewing would hold their work carefully within the small circle of light. Once the candle burned low, the evening effectively ended. Oil lamps were another option. These lamps burned oils from animals, plants, or fish. But oil also cost money and required careful storage. Because of these limitations, the night was naturally quiet. When the light faded, activity slowed. People talked softly, or simply rested in the dim glow of the hearth. Darkness imposed its own schedule on human life. Chapter 12. The Sounds of the Night. Night before electricity was not only darker, it was also louder in unexpected ways. Without the constant hum of machines, engines, and electronics, natural sounds became far more noticeable. The wind moving through trees could sound like distant whispers. Owls called from hidden branches. Dogs barked suddenly in response to unseen movement. In rural areas, wolves sometimes howled across the countryside. These sounds carried farther in the stillness of night. For people lying awake in small wooden homes, every creak of the structure could feel significant. A shifting beam, a loose shutter, footsteps outside could trigger alarm. Because in the darkness, you could hear much more than you could see, and the mind often filled the gaps with imagination. Chapter 13. The Night Sky as a Map. For travelers, sailors, and explorers, the night sky was not only beautiful, it was essential. Before modern navigation tools, stars served as guides across vast distances. Sailors crossing oceans learned to recognize constellations that helped determine direction. Certain stars rose and set in predictable patterns. By observing them carefully, navigators could estimate their position on the open sea. Farmers also paid attention to the stars. Seasonal constellations signaled changes in weather and planting cycles. For ordinary people, the night sky was part of everyday knowledge. Children learned the shapes of constellations the same way modern children learn road signs. Stories were attached to them. Legends explained their origins. The sky was not an empty void. It was a map filled with meaning. And because there was no electric light to dim its glow, the stars appeared far more numerous than most people today have ever seen. Chapter 14. Bells that marked the night. In many towns and villages, bells played an important role in organizing nighttime life. Church bells often rang at specific hours. These bells told people when it was time to return home. In some places, the ringing of a bell marked the official beginning of curfew. After this moment, streets were expected to grow quiet. Anyone wandering outside without good reason might attract suspicion. Watchmen patrolling the streets listened for unusual sounds. Fires were one of their greatest fears. In cities built largely from wood, a single unattended flame could destroy entire neighborhoods. So night watchmen carried lanterns and sometimes shouted the hour as they walked their routes. Their voices echoed through dark streets. 10 o'clock, and all is well. These calls reassured sleeping residents that someone remained awake and alert, guarding the silent city. Chapter 15. Nighttime Storytelling. Because nights were long and dark, storytelling became an important form of entertainment. Families gathered around fireplaces and candles to share tales passed down through generations. Some stories were humorous. Others were lessons meant to teach children right from wrong. But many stories were about mysterious creatures believed to appear after sunset. Ghosts wandering lonely roads. Spirits living deep in forests. Witches flying across moonlit skies. These stories reflected both imagination and genuine belief. In a world where darkness hid so much from view, the line between reality and myth often blurred. Children listened carefully, sometimes with wide eyes. The flickering firelight made shadows dance along the walls, and the night felt alive with possibilities. Chapter 16. waiting for the first light. Eventually, the deepest hours of night passed. The air grew colder, and somewhere far beyond the horizon, the sun began its slow return. Before electricity, dawn was one of the most anticipated moments of the day. As the sky gradually shifted from black to deep blue, then to pale gray, people began to stir. Roosters crowed. Farmers rose from their beds. Kitchen fires were relit. The first rays of sunlight pushed away the darkness that had ruled the world for hours. With daylight came safety, visibility, energy. The world awakened once again. Final reflection. The night before electricity shaped human life in ways we rarely consider today. Darkness influenced when people slept, how they traveled, what they feared, and how they understood the world around them. Modern lights have pushed that darkness away. Cities glow constantly. Screens shine late into the night, and true darkness has become rare. But for thousands of years, night was not simply the end of the day. It was an entirely different world. One filled with shadows, stars, quiet sounds, and deep imagination.